I woke up standing in my kitchen with my hands pressed flat against the table, and no memory of how long I had been there. A row of neatly arranged notes lay in front of me, each written in my handwriting, and each telling me what to do next. The first note instructed me to check the locks, and the door was already locked when I touched it. The second note told me to drink water, and a glass beside it was half empty and still cold. The third note said not to panic, which made me pause longer than I should have. At the bottom of the stack was a note I had not seen before that read today will be difficult. I followed the instructions because they felt practiced rather than comforting. The notes guided me through showering, dressing, and leaving the apartment exactly on time. Outside, my phone vibrated with reminders already marked as completed. At work, I functioned smoothly, finishing tasks before I remembered being assigned them. When I returned home that evening, a new note waited on the table telling me to read the old ones carefully. I spread them out and noticed dates written faintly in the corners. Some were weeks old, some months. One note carried a date from nearly a year earlier. That was when the shock of recognition arrived. Not emotional, but factual and undeniable. I realized I had been waking up like this for a very long time. The next note instructed me to sit and review the binder under the sink. I found it sealed in plastic, thick with pages labeled Daily Reconstruction. Inside were detailed instructions for rebuilding my routine step by step. Each section ended with a warning to trust the notes and not my recollection. I turned pages faster as the entries became more specific. They described mornings I could not remember and nights I could not place. Several pages mentioned gaps lasting hours that were to be ignored. The binder included photographs of my apartment from angles, suggesting careful documentation. Some photos showed me asleep in different rooms. I checked the timestamps and felt the weight of evidence settle in place. A later section explained that resistance caused instability. Another advised that forgetting was expected and had happened repeatedly. I reached the final page and saw a sentence written darker than the rest stating, "If you are reading this for the first time again, you must continue." I sat at the table until the light outside faded exactly as described. A note instructed me to prepare dinner using ingredients already measured. The food was warm before I touched it. Another note reminded me to clean thoroughly and leave nothing misplaced. I obeyed because deviation was listed as dangerous. Before bed, I found a final note telling me to place fresh notes for the morning. I wrote them carefully, even though my hand shook slightly from effort. I dated them and hesitated before adding the warning line at the bottom. I slept without dreams and woke to the same table and the same notes as if no time had passed. The second morning began with a note telling me to read page 7 of the binder again. Page 7 explained the first incident that led to the system. According to the entry, I had once lost 3 days entirely and been found functioning but disconnected. The notes described how I had created reminders to prevent collapse. Another page documented a moment when I attempted to stop writing notes and failed. The writing grew more clinical over time, less emotional and more procedural. I noticed language changes that suggested acceptance rather than fear. A later entry stated that the notes were no longer optional. I searched the apartment for any sign of interruption or outside involvement and found none. Everything matched the binder descriptions too precisely. The refrigerator contained labeled containers dated today. The trash held scraps from meals I did not remember preparing. My phone history showed calls made to my own number. Recorded messages instructed me to remain calm and follow the system. I listened to one and heard my voice speaking clearly and firmly. It explained that the condition worsened under stress and improved with structure. It ended by reminding me that discovery caused distress, but was temporary. I felt no relief from hearing it, only confirmation. That afternoon, I found a calendar hidden behind a cabinet panel. Every day was marked with a check or a restart symbol. Restarts appeared frequently at first, and then less often. The recent months showed perfect compliance. A note beside the calendar stated progress achieved. I began to understand that this was not chaos, but maintenance. That night, I tried to stay awake past the written schedule. The lights dimmed automatically at the listed time. I checked the breaker and found nothing unusual. Another note appeared on the table telling me to stop testing limits. I did not remember placing it there. I followed the bedtime routine exactly and woke without interruption. The next morning, the notes were fewer. They assumed familiarity. One instructed me to stop reading the binder daily. Another advised trust in automatic behavior. I realized the system was refining itself. At work, my performance reviews praised consistency. At home, the apartment remained immaculate, without effort. The gaps in memory stopped bothering me because the outcomes were always correct. One evening, I found a note I had not written yet. It described the moment of full acceptance as approaching. I compared handwriting samples and found no variation. The binder's final section outlined a long-term plan to live without awareness of resets. It concluded that conscious resistance increased frequency. I closed the binder and sealed it again as instructed. I placed fewer notes on the table that night. Before sleeping, I wrote one last sentence reminding myself that this was intentional. When I woke, the table was clear, except for a single note stating the system was complete. I woke on the floor beside the table with a pen still in my hand and no notes in sight. The clock showed a time that did not align with any routine I recognized. My phone displayed completed reminders I did not remember seeing. The binder was no longer under the sink. I searched every cabinet and found it inside the oven, cold and unplugged. A new section had been added labeled transition phase. It explained that awareness sometimes returned briefly during optimization. The instructions told me not to create new notes unless prompted. I checked the table and saw faint impressions where papers had rested repeatedly. The refrigerator labels had changed to simpler markings. The calendar behind the cabinet panel showed only checks with no restarts for weeks. A message appeared on my phone instructing me to continue the day normally. I followed it and noticed how automatic every movement felt. Doors locked behind me without thought. Tasks completed themselves once begun. At work, I found documents already finished under my name. Colleagues thanked me for reminders I had sent earlier. My sent messages folder was full of precise instructions written in my voice. I returned home to find the table empty again. The binder sat openly on the counter, as if waiting. Inside, a page explained that the system had begun operating without conscious input. Another page clarified that memory loss was no longer a flaw, but a feature. It stated that awareness interfered with stability. I closed the binder and placed it back as directed. That evening, I noticed I could not recall my morning clearly. The absence felt documented rather than alarming. I discovered a single note folded into my pocket, instructing me to discard it after reading. I followed the instruction and felt the day settle into order. The apartment lights adjusted automatically. The water temperature regulated itself. The notes were no longer needed because behavior had been fully conditioned. I attempted to resist by rearranging objects. Within minutes, everything returned to its prior position. A message appeared on my phone, advising against further deviation. I realized the system corrected faster now. The binder's language grew shorter and more final. One sentence stated that the reconstruction phase was complete. Another stated that the observer role was ending. I slept deeply and woke refreshed with no confusion. The table remained clear. The absence of notes felt deliberate. My phone displayed only essential reminders. The calendar showed no symbols at all. I understood that forgetting was now continuous and seamless. The signs that once warned me had done their job. I functioned perfectly without them. I woke weeks later to a sound I could not place and found the table covered in notes again. The handwriting was mine, but shakier than I remembered. The first note instructed me to remain calm. The second told me to read the binder immediately. The binder lay open to the first page, as if reset. It described a failure event caused by external stress. The notes explained that the system could collapse without maintenance. I read further and saw dates jumping backward. The calendar behind the cabinet panel showed restarts again. A final note at the bottom of the stack stated that this moment always returned eventually. I understood then that the system was not designed to end. It was designed to loop. Each version of me built structure for the next. Each acceptance created stability until the next disruption. The binder documented dozens of cycles spanning years. Photographs showed subtle changes in my appearance across versions. Notes warned that awareness would always feel new. The final instruction told me to begin again without attempting escape. I sat at the table and arranged the notes carefully. I wrote the familiar steps with practiced precision. I dated them and added the warning line at the bottom. I placed the binder back under the sink and sealed it. I cleaned the apartment thoroughly. I prepared the measured ingredients for dinner. I checked the locks and aligned the items on the counter. I placed a fresh note for the morning. I slept without dreams. When I woke, the notes waited exactly as planned. I followed them without hesitation. The system resumed its quiet efficiency. The truth no longer felt shocking because it was procedural. I understood that the signs were never meant to stop me. They were meant to rebuild me every time.